Start whenever you're ready, Bri. We looked at your website very briefly, and we talked a
Oh,
little bit
cool.
about the themes and the overviews, but we would love to hear from you about your
Yeah.
practice, your process, your journey, your uh,
Yeah.
battles with censorship, and all of that. And I will say this class is it's an upper division transdisciplinary class, and everyone has been making work about gender and sexuality in interdisciplinary
Cool.
forms all semester, and they're fearless and fierce and amazing. They're
Perfect. Okay, perfect. My crowd.
Thank you, and thanks for being here on
Yeah.
short
Oh
notice.
man, I'm so excited. This is like my favorite thing to do is talk about art.
Yay! Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I would have really loved that, but this is also awesome.
It is great because it allows, well, you didn't have to brave the five.
Right. Right.
So yeah, we'll take it away.
Okay. Well, hi everybody. My name is Bri Cirel. I'm an artist, primarily working in oil paint, and my work largely focuses on gender politics, body politics, and women's representation in images, art, and in advertising. And just to give like a small introduction into becoming an artist, I actually entered into the painting world. Very ignorant to the dynamics because I did go to art school, but I graduated with a film video degree. And it wasn't until like a good 10 years after graduating that I started oil painting. And so again, I was very kind of ignorant to a lot of the history. And when I first started out, I would just do a lot of research on my own and be Googling stuff to get inspired. And I was Googling things like greatest paintings of all time and the best artists throughout history. And this was in 2011. I was shocked at the time because every list that came back was all male artists. I mean, even I found like a list of like the 100 best paintings in history, and they were all by male artists, and many of them were of nude women. So this started my journey, and I really started with questions. I was questioning the dynamics because I really came in as an outsider, and so these were kind of the first questions, and I'll go over these throughout this discussion. But why are there so many images of nude women in art was definitely my first encounter and my first question. Why are there so many images of women, but not about them? What is art versus what is porn, and who gets to make that decision? This is one that I struggle with all the time. What does an image of an empowered and dignified woman look like? And what does the female gaze look like? And again, I'll go through all these throughout the discussion. So, why are there so many images of nude women in art? Again, this was what I encountered when I was first Googling and just researching and trying to get inspiration, and I was running into this dynamic. And so, one of the first paintings this is the first oil painting that I ever made. It's called Tits and Art. And I was approaching sort of this bias with humor. I do think I do that in general, and I think it was kind of like helping me cope with the understanding that it's so gendered, which I didn't know that going into it. Um, and so what I was doing was sort of poking fun. I wanted to recreate kind of like a classical nude in sepia tones, and then I was using text to really like encase her body and reduce her to this sexualized object, and sort of joking that like, oh, how do you make a great painting? This is how you make a great painting. You put some tits in it and you call it art. So yeah, this was my very first kind of experimentation with this style of using text and putting an image within the text. And I painted this, I believe, in 2011. And then these paintings came shortly after. these are both images of Venus, and part of the foundation of like classical art. There's a lot of sculptures of Venus and Aphrodite. And again, I was approaching it as an outsider and almost like seeing these images out of context, where like literally they're just nude bodies, nude women's bodies without heads and arms. And so these are images layered on top of themselves and just offset a little bit so that the text kind of reveals itself. And the text reads, "My eyes are up here." And again, I was, approaching it with a little bit of humor, trying to point out the lack of personhood, and the objectification of these forms. And yeah, these again were kind of earlier paintings and in my earlier style. And so I quickly learned that in order to find women artists, I had to Google great women artists in history, which is very problematic in itself because it's putting women in this subgenre, which women are not a minority. We're half the population. So that's why I felt like I expected us to be in just the top 100 list. But as I was researching female artists, because I was very interested in specifically what they were painting, since I understand, men were painting the nude female body so much, I instantly found Barbara Kruger, and it was like love at first sight. Like the way that I identified immediately, the way that she uses common language, familiar language within advertisement, which is a language I believe we've all been trained in since the day we were born. She uses it to like flip it on its head and make commentary about societal attitudes towards women. And specifically this piece on the right, "You are not yourself," or it really largely reads, "You are yourself," with that little word not. I think you'll see some of the examples in my work. You'll kind of see I relate to this one so much, and I'll show you some pieces. So the next few slides are just a few pieces that you'll be able to see some of my influences. Well, actually, oops, sorry. There's some of the other influences are Guerrilla Girls was um, another female artist group that I ran into off the bat, and they're like straightforward, bold text, calling out sexism, racism in the art world. I mean, I really connected with this, especially in this time when I was researching and being confronted with the gendered sexism and biasness that was happening in the art world that I, again, was kind of ignorant to, kind of newly coming into the painting world. So yeah, their work very much resonated with me. And I feel like one of the earliest influences is actually a punk band. I don't consider myself a person who really listened to punk music that much, but I luckily found Crass early on, and they were just they're very unapologetically feminist, anti-racist, anti-fascist, environmentalist. A lot of their music is aggressive for the right reasons, I feel like. And specifically, this album, Penis Envy, is by all the women in the group. And sadly, this album is so relevant today. And so if you've not heard of Crass, or I recommend this album specifically, Penis Envy. It's incredible. And then also, the kind of sarcastic title, Penis Envy, very much like resonated with me. So yeah, here are a few, I'm going to show you a few slides of work that I feel like you can see the influence right off the bat. This is a piece called Smile, and it's a mashup of two kind of competing images of this like grimacing smile with over what I remember it being an advertisement, a vintage advertisement for like a beauty product. Um, and it's to depict that frustration and that inner turmoil of being expected to kind of perform femininity. And obviously, if you feel like smiling, you will. So to be, commanded to smile is just absurd. And so this was kind of playing with that, like, I don't know, that moment of like frustration and anger and wanting to like lash out. And again, I was using text, I feel like is very much influenced by Barbara and just like the mashup of imagery found in advertisement. I actually think the lips were also an advertisement for lipstick. So and then this is a series you could see I've made them at different times, but it's called XOXO, also playing with the societal grooming of women to be pretty and pleasant and that performance aspect while, we're human and we're feeling the human condition and we're expected to be these pleasant wonderful people. And so this is also playing with that dynamic of being expected to perform femininity, but being a person underneath that. These are two paintings that come from an ongoing series that is an anagram series. And so sometimes my work starts with a concept, sometimes I'm inspired by an image, and then sometimes it starts with the word first. And this is one where I was specifically focusing on gendered words, and the first one, woman. I would just write gendered words on my phone and stare at them sometimes. And I remember this specifically was like in the middle of the night, I was looking at my phone, and suddenly the words own me like revealed themselves embedded within the word woman. And it really was like my mind exploded. I just could not believe like hidden in plain sight are these like social commands. So that painting really made itself. That is not Marilyn Monroe, but she, is one of those bombshell actresses from the time. And I felt like she really embodied that, the spirit of own me. And I also like kind of relate this to that Barbara Kruger image of the shattered mirror. There's a shattered effect kind of with piecing her body into these portions. And then equality was one where I was trying to use the anagram to kind of explore the duality of defeat and rage. I mean, this is one that I really kind of feel like I'm identifying more with right now. Um, yeah, the struggle and the complexity against inequities. And there's the red has this like bubbling rage, but then there's also this exhaustion and a quiet defeat. And the two exist at the same time. It is an inner struggle when you're battling biases and inequality. And so this one's playing with that. Again, sort of a shattered mirror, shattered reflection effect that I feel it was inspired by the earlier references. And then this is looks. It's again two competing images. And this really talks about that dynamic. I sometimes focus on the nuance of a word. So looks being like, women's looks, and then also the voyeurism and the sort of oppression of the male gaze and those eyes. I wanted to have these dangerous looking eyes, and then also layered over the woman who again came from an ad, a beauty ad, and I believe this one was about aging, and that's just so demeaning in terms of being having our looks be focused on most, especially as we age and we get more wise and get more empowered. There's more judgment on the way we look. And so this piece was specifically playing with that dynamic. And so I'll go into my next question, which is why are there so many images of women and not about them? And like this, I really encountered early when I was doing research of Marilyn Monroe, and this is Andy Warhol's repetition of Marilyn Monroe, but she is an image that gets repeated so much in art. And none of the images are about her. She became sort of like a shorthand for art in itself. And I do feel like that comes from like Andy Warhol. Um, but she was such an interesting person and led such an interesting life. And I do think the expectation of her just being an image like led to her demise. You know, she had a human condition going on within her that seemingly wasn't welcome in the public, and she was just this image. So this is an early piece that I did called Her Again, and it's again the style of layering two images on top of each other, just offset a little bit, with the text her again sort of being revealed through that offset. And what I wanted to do was boil her down to her most iconic attributes, her hair, her mole, her boobs, and really kind of like expose this hollowness and the torture and the emptiness of just repeating her image over and over. Um, and yeah, this was sort of my reaction to researching images and great images in art and finding so many hollow images of women that were not about them, but of them. I find that like very strange. And then here's Barbara Kruger. I came across this later on, her version of Marilyn, which is definitely about her. And I love this piece so much because not stupid enough, I feel like is the perfect way to say that, you know, it led to her demise because she couldn't just be the pretty poster that everybody demanded of her. And so this is a book that I highly recommend. I actually just read this in 2022, Woman in the Picture by Catherine McCormick. This book answered some of my earlier questions. Why is there so many nude images of women in art, and why are so many images of women not about them? Historically speaking, women have not been allowed to look specifically at the world of men. They've been barred from participating in professional realms as artists, as doctors. They have been excluded from medicine, philosophy, politics, banned from experiencing public spaces, excluded from professional practices, banned from looking and portraying bodies, giving men total control over how women appear in public, um, and appear in art and are understood medically for centuries, for all of centuries, leading up until now, which is something that I'm reflecting on. As imperfect as social media is, I do think that this is one of the first times in our history that women are actually able to literally cut out the middleman and show themselves, represent themselves, show themselves without makeup, talk about their personal experiences, be human and share with, you know, society, share with each other. We're able to see ourselves, and I'm curious if this is what the female gaze is. I'm curious if the female gaze is us seeing ourselves and seeing each other. So that's something I'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, again, my questions about why are there so many nude women, I felt like this book put the puzzle together where I was seeing a lot of the pieces throughout my career earlier on and not really understanding the full context of like how damaging it's been that women have not been able to represent ourselves in imagery for all of history. And then here's another Guerrilla Girls, their pieces specifically talking about the inequity in art. And it's not just the visual art, you know, they reference music videos here. And this is something that it's still sinking in, how it's permeating every sector of our social lives. Not just in art, but here's another book that I started reading, Monuments and Maidens, and the allegory of the female form. And this is where I've been learning that it's also in statues and in public figures that are, yeah, statues, that female forms tend to be perceived as generic and universal with symbolic meanings. So you could think of the Statue of Liberty or Lady Justice. while male figures are seen as individuals and they represent real people. And you see the stats, the little clip that I took up there that says around 300 statues are honoring real women compared to 5,000 statues honoring real men. And so only 6% of American monuments are featuring real women. So this inequity is not just in two dimension, it's in three dimension. And then this was something that I just heard last year. Despite the success of the Barbie movie being one of the biggest movies of the year, turns out 2023 was one of the worst years since 2010 for women's representation in film, which it just kind of trips me out that this isn't more apparent. You know, I had to read that in order to understand it. The invisibility of these injustices, and it's very confusing to me that it wouldn't be more apparent. Especially again, I do think things like the success of the Barbie movie, you know, takes the headline when really it was the lowest number since 2010 for lead roles and co-lead roles featuring women. Um, and so that goes into my next question. What is art and what is porn and who gets to decide? And so I put this statue up. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Mary Beard, but she is incredible. I highly recommend watching her videos. There's tons on YouTube. She's hilarious. And the way that she speaks about art is just incredible. But so she told this story about this statue, the first nude female statue, that it was so groundbreaking at the time that it actually, her story is that it would arouse the public, male public, so much that a man he kind of lost his mind. He ejaculated on the statue and then ended up committing suicide. So that this is a story Mary tells better than I do, but that just goes to show you the I would say that the arousal of somebody to the point of doing that to the statue would suggest that it's pornographic, yet this statue and many iterations of this statue have been done throughout all of time, and they are in public view in the highest institutions, in museums. They're there, they're considered art, and they're considered not sexualized, apparently. So I think that again, this is something that doesn't have an answer because depending on the powers that are controlling the visuals, the goalposts keep moving on this one, and this is something I always am exploring in my art. And so here are two paintings of where I'm specifically exploring this. It's that overlap of porn and art. And so the both pieces have the word porn, art, and then feature a an image of a nude woman's chest. And so the first one says art in the overall shape with the image of the nude chest, and then the word porn that's colorized in that hot pink within it. And then on the right is kind of the opposite. It's the shape of porn with the word art in it, and then the nude chest. And I was kind of playing with like how to desexualize it. When is it desexualized? Is creating the body in these like technicolors or turning them into like a black and white, like a statue, does that make it porn? Does that make it art? Um, and then here are two other versions that say nude and art with the same sort of effect with the overall shape, and then another word existing within it with the image of the nude female chest. So art nude is a term that I learned early on that is specifically a technique that artists are supposed to use by looking at the human form and stripping the context away from it so to more accurately represent it in and more accurately render it. But my question is, what happens when you strip the context and the humanity out of the image of a nude woman, and then that's what permeates art history? That is very problematic, I think. And I'll discuss later how I feel like that's affected our social consciousness and psychology about how we view women. Um, so here's an example of the decision being made. In 2016, it was my first solo show in Los Angeles. And coincidingly, Vice wrote an article about my work, and the article was released around the same time as my show opening. And so I was super excited. I felt all this momentum about my career, about my artwork. And I posted this article, and it was done in such a way that within the article embedded was one of my paintings, this image, which was going to be featured in the show. And it made it so that when I posted the article, the image was automatically attached to it. And this was in 2016. Again, I was using Facebook at the time. And I was getting notifications from Facebook that I was violating their terms of service by sharing this article. And I really felt like I just rebelled against that and was not going to let that deter me because this was a very exciting moment for me. So I continued to share the article. And actually, it was the day of my show opening, I was kicked off Facebook entirely. My profile was erased. And that really was my first lesson in terms of the powers that can stifle your momentum. I had a great show, but I did have a lot of people contacting me the day of the show saying, I went to Facebook to find the directions or the location or the time, and I couldn't find it. So, yeah, this was a first instance where I kind of felt that power dynamic of being shut down. And again, apparently, Facebook declares it as porn when my question was, is this porn? Is this art? And the struggle continues. In 2019, I had my first solo show in New York, and I was trying to share my work on Instagram this time. I moved off of Facebook, and I do feel like I had good success with Instagram initially. I had good traffic. I was able to have galleries see me and connect with me, and I had private buyers contact me, and everything was going great. I felt like leading until I was advertising for my first solo show in New York. So here's the note. Here's a lot of the notifications I got in 2019. And here's how funny or interesting the instance is. So here's a painting that was featured in that show of statues. So it's a painting of statues that are, again, these are all forms of Venus. This was supposed to be a play on the Three Graces, but they were all Venus statues. And again, I colorized them in this way that is not human. They're images of statues, but this one was getting removed for nudity. And what was interesting about this is that I had other male artist friends who were able to share this image and not get notifications about it. So I do think at some point I was flagged and ultra policed, and still to this day, I'm actually wearing my shadow band t-shirt. It's these rules are invisible and it's hard to be able to figure out what's going on, but I do believe that I'm highly censored and shadow banned on the social media, which um, yeah, it makes it hard to share a lot of my work, which is interesting because it's being categorized as porn when very specifically my work is about personhood. And bringing personhood and questioning personhood in the portrayal of women's bodies. And so that goes into this next section of what does an image of an empowered and dignified woman look like? So I made this image. Actually, that was something that came from the Women in the Picture book by Catherine McCormick. That book, it's not necessarily a conclusion, but it did end with the concept that there is no universal language to depict a dignified woman. And that realization or that thought it was driving me crazy. I just like the understanding that there's no language for that established. And so I was doing a lot of research. I was researching political posters. This is a political poster that I made in 2022, knowing that it was the year that the Supreme Court was going to be making a ruling on Roe versus Wade. And so I was inspired by the Hope poster, Shepard Fairey's Hope poster. And for lack of a better term, I wanted to make the Pussy Hope poster, is what I was kind of like thinking when I first wanted to create an image. And so while researching, I came across this term, reproductive justice, which is a term coined by an all Black women collective called Sister Song. And they really reframed the idea of choice, that choice is not enough. There are more systems in place to interfere with women's choice when they're not white. And that true equality, abortion is the floor of equality, and true equality is fair and free access to the best healthcare, information, destigmatizing sex, um, and the best resources for all women. So that was very much, those two aspects were a big driving point for the design of this image. And I also made this specifically because I knew I wanted to paint it as a mural in public. So a lot of my work is can't exist in public because of the nudity, but I was really trying to design something that would be a political statement. Also, I wanted to play with patriotism, which is why I used the flag. Um, yeah, and I wanted to piece all these things together and actually be able to paint this as my first mural. And so here's just some process shots of the making of this image. And here it is in its mural form in downtown Los Angeles. I painted it 20 feet by 12 feet. And this being my first mural, my first experience to do this, I was terrified. And I actually did not know at all how to paint a mural, how to do this. And in a way, that led to an interesting thought process of wanting, I live in the Valley, which is a good half hour, 40 minutes from downtown Los Angeles. I knew I was going to have to leave the mural undone in phases. And so I was thinking about the best way to kind of unravel this image and build it as like a story in public while it was going to be left unfinished. So I started with the background, the stars and stripes, and left for the weekend. And then when I came back the next week, I put in the text, I am somebody, not just somebody, not just somebody. Um, And then the next phase was to paint this woman's face. And what I really I got this woman from a website that's actually an art nude model website that you can pay to obtain the pictures and be able to use them in art. And I looked at, many different women, but it was her face that I really gravitated to, her looking up and just, something about her face I felt like really hit the mark in terms of what I wanted to do with this message. So building her face into the text was the next phase. And then here we are, it's halfway done. I got the left side done, and I actually caught coronavirus at this time. So I had to take a 2-week break, and you can see there's a little bit of vandalism done between that time. There's just some handprints. It was something that I had to come back and fix up before I could start the right side. But the interesting part about this is the first half was painted before Roe v. Wade was overturned, got sick with coronavirus, and that was the week that the Supreme Court justice overturned Roe v. Wade. And I was terrified to go back and paint a 12-foot tall nude woman's body in public at this point. Yeah, something about being sick, about taking the 2 weeks off, and then the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It was just a lot, and I really did not want to go back. I was so terrified, but I have a great support system of friends and fellow artists, and everybody very much encouraged me, go back, finish it. And I actually had an incredible time because I had such a great reception from the public. There was a lot of foot traffic walking by me, a lot of women in downtown Los Angeles. A lot of Black women were very inspired by it and very encouraging to me. And I actually had lots of young women come up to me. I actually got posters of my original image printed, and I was handing them out to people and engaging in conversation, and it turned out to be super fulfilling, and a huge challenge that I feel like was like a major accomplishment. And here I am the day that I finished it. Um, yeah, it just I'm really glad that I did the whole experience, even though it was during such an intense time. And I again feel like it is so interesting that the first half was painted with women's rights intact and the second half painted once everything was overturned. And so I didn't expect this mural to last for a long time or last forever. It's in downtown Los Angeles. There's a lot of graffiti down there. But it was only about a month and a half before it was vandalized. And it is interesting, I think, the placement of where the tag occurred. It was over the nude woman's body. Um, and then on the right, you could see that is what the wall looks like today. So it was defeating in the moment, but it also to me speaks to the importance of creating empowered images of women. And it's something that, um, even though, Facebook wants to ban me and my murals are getting painted over, there's just a determination that this is a super important uh, thing that needs to happen. And so, we just go on. It won't deter me. Um, and so this goes into actually my last kind of section of slides, which is a series that I'm working on right now called Body Language, and it was inspired by this article. I read the headline, Women are seen as parts by the human brain, and men are perceived as a whole person, as a whole body. And that, I believe, as soon as I read that, I honestly felt like that is socially conditioned from all the centuries of women not being able to represent ourselves through images and men being the ones only having control. And if you look at a lot of advertisements, there's a lot of disembodied, chopped up, images of women selling lipstick or pantyhose, or it's just more common to see women portrayed in a way that's less human that I feel like I'm not a psychologist. I can't say this for sure, but it feels like it's been conditioned into our psyche. And so here's the series, Body Language, again, that's ongoing. I keep adding to it. But what I wanted to do is exaggerate the effect and see what it looks like in terms of yeah, really exaggerating it on the nude female form and showing the torture to the human form, and sort of like it's like a shredded body that this effect occurs on the form. And here's another iteration of it that I played with different body positions, and yeah, I'm still really exploring this visual to the point where I've actually been applying to grants to commission what this hasn't been made yet. This is something that I'm working on, but I would like to make a statue version of this. And this is the form of Venus, that one that Mary Beard had talked about, which you could kind of consider as like the origin of objectification of the female form. And so applying this effect on that statue in particular, and I want it to be built out of like steel or some sort of hard metal to really show that it's like this oppressive cage. Um, and this would be kind of commenting on the past, using the effect to comment on the history and the past of it. And this is something that I'm working on that I feel like is to sort of go into the future. I've been talking with designers. It's pretty exciting. I hooked up with a friend of a friend, knew a designer from Runway. Her name is Hester Sunshine. We really connected on this. And again, I'm applying for grants to commission these pieces. I'm considering them soft sculpture more than fashion because of how conceptual they are. But the idea is to make them wearable pieces that a human woman who is alive, who has eyes and can move around, can inhabit and actually fill in the gaps of the effect and have her human form be alive, and in that way kind of be more confrontational against this bias. And particularly I'm excited about the one on the left, the woman own me, because I mean sorry, the woman omen, because an omen is, it could be thought of as bad, it could be thought as good, but it's a sign of things to come. And the idea is, when you take the glasses off it says omen, but you put these glasses on and then it becomes the word woman. And that transformation, I feel like, just empowering the female form, using the effect kind of against itself, and filling out the gaps to combat this bias. And so this is my last slide. And with the understanding that pictures are not neutral, these are the questions that I am grappling with now, which is, when you are looking at an image, whose values are being represented? And this is something it's just now like baked into the way I see things. Everything from advertisement to movies, commercials, art. When you're looking at it, it is not a neutral, leisurely piece, or image. A lot of times there is something baked into it, and questioning what is behind it, I feel like, is important to sort of unravel these invisible biases that are evident across all sectors of all visuals. And can a woman's personhood be recognized when she's depicted nude? Again, this is something that I question constantly. I do have a piece, I forgot to put the slide in, but it says some body with the word some on top and the word body. And again, it's playing with the nuance of the word somebody or some body, but it's an image of a nude woman inside of it. And it's playing with the duality of like, this is a person, this is somebody, but broken up into these pieces is also just some pieces of a body. So playing with that duality is is interesting. I like to use common visuals and even use the male gaze to sort of allure viewers in, and then baked in there is a deeper meaning or a question that I'm hoping that the viewer discovers on their own. I do feel like with the blending of text and imagery, that sort of juxtaposition sometimes can create like a magical third meaning that exists within the viewer. And it's almost like an inception, like aha moment that I feel like that they could have on their own. That I'm really interested in playing with that. And then the last one is, what does the female gaze look like? And this is what I would like to move towards in my art. I don't know. I don't know what the female gaze looks like. There is no history depicting, no representation. So again, I think social media might be our practice in this right now. This is us showing ourselves, seeing each other. And so I would like to, in my artwork, and I believe that's what I'm trying to do with the soft sculpture clothing that I showed you, move away from critiquing the male gaze and start exploring what the female gaze looks like. And yeah, try and explore that more. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now in terms of my artistic journey. And yeah, I guess I'm open for questions if anybody has any questions.
That was, first of all, thank you. Let's see.
Yay! Yeah.
Let me remove the pin so we can um that was so perfect because we have been talking about so many of these things and we just talked about the female gaze or
Yeah.
before you came to talk.
Oh,
So
cool.
I will try to position it like this. I'm not sure if I can fix the blurring, but we're about to we have about 4 minutes, 5 minutes before class ends.
Okay.
So
Okay.
ask fast questions. Yeah. I'll come to you. I'll come to you. Like a game
Yeah.
show.
I was curious about the mural process.
Yeah.
Because a mural is like it's a lot more temporary of an art form, but also has a lot more potential for like public outreach. How did you
Yeah.
find making mural as a form of artwork in terms of like self-fulfillment and then also like artistic fulfillment of like getting your messaging across versus d different forms that you've worked in?
Yeah, so the mural actually was my attempt to. So I was being so censored on social media that I knew that I had to find an alternative route to engage in art and talk to the public. So that was the initial idea, was like, I can't rely on social media to share my message. I need to go in public. I need to be more present. And so it was through friends that I was able to get hooked up with the opportunity to get that wall. And I found it so fulfilling. I literally, it was such a special experience, especially overcoming the terror of never doing a mural in my life, not knowing what I was doing. I do have friends that have done murals before, and I definitely tapped their brain and tried to ask as many questions in terms of tips, how to go about this. Everybody has a different style, so I definitely got um, a lot of different ideas of how to go about it. But it was really just believing in myself, I guess. There was a sense of like, I want to do this, I have to do this. I do think, like I said, entering into painting later on also had to do with a sort of determination that I want to do this. I need to figure this out. And there's a sort of maybe even obsession that comes along with forcing it to happen. So I feel extremely proud, regardless of how long it existed in the world. I do feel extremely proud that I did that, I accomplished it. It was terrifying. It really was. And like I said, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, before I was actually able to paint the 12-foot tall nude female body, it was scary. That particular moment was scary for me. But ag- having finished it, I just feel like it was just a huge accomplishment, regardless of how long it lived on. And I have all these pictures and I'm able to share it. It does live on, I guess, in picture form and on the internet forever after that. So if you're thinking about doing a mural, and even if you're scared out of your pants about doing it, I highly recommend going for it. Do it. Because again, get your voice out there, be loud, take the mic, take up space. I think that it's on us. It's on us as females to be the ones charging the imagery, because there's lots of history to combat, basically, and we have to be doing this right now. So I encourage you, if you're interested, do it.
We have to wrap it up, but I wanted to suggest that people follow you on Instagram and
Yeah.
possibly ask
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask me questions. You guys can contact me. I'd be happy to talk more about this. I
I,
love talking about art.
I feel like there's so much to talk about, and I have lots of
I know.
follow-ups and stuff. So
Yeah.
I thank you so much for such a beautifully organized presentation and such incredible work. We really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And it's just really great connecting with you, connecting with everybody. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. And I'll send you the video.
Great. That sounds awesome. All right. Have
Okay.
a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Bri. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Okay. Well, oh. Ooh.